A lot has been said about the visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the United States. It's been a state visit which has really taken the US-India relationship to the next level. It's a relationship which has progressed at so many levels. It is a strategic relationship, among the closest strategic relationships that either country has with any other partner. But it's also been about a deep technology exchange which really does set the path for the future of the relationship. Joining us now, a very special guest, Congressman Ro Khanna, co-chair of the India-US Caucus. Thanks very much, Mr. Khanna, for being with us. To you, what is the big takeaway from the state visit of Prime Minister Modi?
The visit was a big success. Of course, there were deals that were done, the jet engine deal, the strengthening of defense, the strengthening of technology. But the biggest takeaway is the strengthening of the people-to-people contact. There is a deepening of the cultural ties between the United States and India, and that was on display. The warmth between the American people and India was on display.
Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because at one level it began in New York before the Prime Minister even came to Washington. There was the Yoga Day on the lawns of the United Nations. It's something that India has taken to the world. Then on the lawns of the White House, we saw so many Indians present. Could you tell us a little bit about that personal connect that you saw?
Well, you saw thousands of Indian Americans come to Washington, and the American people got to see so much of Indian culture, from Pen Masala performing at the state dinner with Indian tunes to conversations about cricket in the United States, to conversations about Indian cuisine and Indian music. There is a ambition also in both countries to lead on climate, to lead on the next generation of technology, to have a sense of entrepreneurship. And I do think the Indian American community is a bridge. And there are 5 of us now in Congress, Indian Americans. The Prime Minister referred to us as the Samosa Caucus, which we often call ourselves. And that also, I think, added to this growing tie between our two nations.
How would you respond to those who say that essentially, and despite what you say, the relationship is transactional? India needs to buy state-of-the-art weaponry, for example, from the United States. The United States needs India as some sort of a defense against a growing China. So is it transactional or is it more than that?
Well, there is, of course, a mutual strategic interest. There is a strategic interest that the United States has to make sure there's no hegemon in Asia, to make sure that China doesn't emerge as a dominant player where they're violating the territorial integrity of other countries. And India shares that interest, and that allows for concrete advancements on defense, on technology. But the relationship is deeper than that. There is a cooperation on climate. There's a cooperation on technology. There is mutual exchange of visits between the two countries. There is a huge Indian-American diaspora that still has ties to India. There's a celebration of cultural aspects. I think what the United States recognizes is that India is not going to march lockstep with the United States. And there has to be an allowance for India to pursue its foreign policy, but recognizing that in many places that will converge.
There were differences as well, or there have been differences, for example, on the entire issue of human rights. It's a very touchy theme over here, but there were questions which were raised by the media in the United States. There were answers, fairly direct ones, from Prime Minister Modi. How does the U.S. intend to actually address these concerns going forward? Do you expect that to be a touchy issue?
Well, we need to affirm our commitment to pluralism, to minority rights, to making sure every person has dignity. And that is a project for both countries. It's a project in the United States to make sure that we are ensuring equal voting rights everywhere, to make sure that we are dealing with challenges of overcoming discrimination, a history of discrimination, that we're becoming a truly cohesive, multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy. And India has challenges to make sure that it is becoming a democracy that respects every person's rights. No democracy is perfect. And so I think as friends, we need to talk about the challenges in both countries and make sure that we're affirming the values of pluralism and minority rights.
What about, high tech, which you spoke about? One of the most impressive deals which have taken place is for semiconductor technology in India, in the state of Gujarat, from the United States, Micron. Is that really one of the areas which is the future of the relationship, high tech? And you mentioned climate and high tech. There's semiconductors as well. There's defense as well. There's the healthcare sector as well. So the United States investing in India as a partner in science and technology very much for the future.
Yes, and of course Sanjay Malhotra, an Indian American, leads Micron, and it's leading to investment in the United States, in upstate New York, but the collaboration with India will only make Micron more competitive, which will allow us to lead over China and over South Korea, over other countries in Asia. I think there is huge potential for collaboration when it comes to scientific research, technology research, climate research. Right now, the United States has far more NSF papers authored with China, and that's something where I have pushed for building the relationship with India, that we need more academic scholarship, research between our two countries.
And finally, when you met Prime Minister Modi, what did you talk about? You mentioned the Samosa Caucus. That was quite interesting. What was your takeaway in terms of your exchange or your conversation with him?
Well, it was a 20-minute conversation. It was a wide-ranging conversation. We talked about my grandfather, his role in the Indian independence movement. The Prime Minister said that I should be proud of that sacrifice. We talked about India surpassing Great Britain in the GDP and the moment of pride that was. We addressed issues of pluralism and human rights and the challenges for both countries. And then we talked about the Indian-American role in strengthening the strategic relationship. But I appreciated the conversation, which was wide-ranging and constructive.
And a final question, growing up in the United States, when you were a child growing up, you would have seen or perhaps thought it impossible that people of Indian origin would have such a dominant or increasingly dominant role in, let's say, politics, people like yourself today. Could you tell us about what you thought then about where Americans with an Indian origin would be and where you are now?
When I was growing up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, I was born in Philadelphia. They used to call, my cousins in India used to have this pejorative term, ABCD, American Born Confused Daisy, and I was never confused. I was very, very proud of my being American, but also my heritage. But my parents couldn't meet a staffer to a member of Congress back then. And the perception of India when I was in high school was it was a land where cows walked the streets and of magic charmers, and it was one that was not positive. And I had to often correct that perception. I could never have dreamed that one day I'd be representing the most economically influential district in the world, Silicon Valley, and being part of welcoming the Indian Prime Minister, who's being hailed by Washington because of India's success as a rising global power. We have come a long, long way in America, and India has come a long way. And that is something I wish my grandfather could have seen.
Absolutely. Well, wonderful speaking to you, Mr. Khanna. Thanks very much for sharing your thoughts on that visit and where the relationship actually is between the two countries. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. Appreciate it.